You think you know the story of the old woman who lived in a shoe, a simple nursery rhyme, a whimsical verse recited to children before sleep, nothing more than an amusing fragment of English folklore. An old woman, too many children, and a strange house in the form of a shoe. But what if I told you that this tale, sung in playful tones, actually concealed traces of something far more ancient and unsettling, that hidden behind its rhyming simplicity lies the shadow of a prehistoric myth, a ritual of fertility and survival encoded in the form of a shoe that is not merely footwear but a relic of passage between life and death. Archaeologists, folklorists, and cultural historians have traced fragments of this story across centuries and continents. Its origin, far from innocent, may reach back thousands of years, into the dim recesses of human memory, when stories carried the weight of survival, sacrifice, and the mysteries of the human soul. The version most people know begins simply. Once upon a time, there was an old woman. She was poor, she was weary, and she had so many children she scarcely knew what to do. Her home was unlike any other, for it was shaped like a great shoe, standing alone in the midst of an empty field. In this strange dwelling she gathered her children every evening, feeding them the little she could manage, often nothing more than broth or crusts of bread. Yet despite the poverty, she tried to give them comfort. Some versions of the rhyme portray her as harsh, scolding the children, whipping them soundly before sending them to bed. Other versions present her with a gentler hand, giving them broth without bread, then kissing them before tucking them under their covers. The story has no complex plot, no heroes, no monsters. It is simply a fragment, a vignette of a strange woman and her brood surviving in curious circumstances. The ending is often abrupt, closing with the children sleeping in the shoe house, lulled into rest by the tired voice of their mother. For generations, this rhyme has been dismissed as a mere nursery fragment. It was often printed alongside other nonsense verses, amusing jingles, or moralizing snippets meant to keep children entertained. Few questioned why the dwelling was a shoe, or why the old woman seemed to live in such hardship. It was chalked up to the fanciful nature of nursery rhymes, nothing more than whimsy. And yet, as we shall see, the tale has been reshaped across centuries, its meaning obscured, its symbols softened. What survives in rhyme is only the final trace of something older, stranger, and perhaps even unsettling. The earliest known printed version of the rhyme appeared in 1794, in a collection of nursery rhymes circulating in England. This version is the one most commonly remembered. The old woman whipping her children and sending them to bed. It reads as though it carried a faint moral edge, a lesson about discipline, order, and the responsibilities of motherhood in a harsh age. But the tale was not fixed. Later versions softened the mother's role. By the early 19th century, some publications had her giving the children broth, then bread, and finally a gentle kiss before bed. Victorian collectors of folklore, such as James Orchard Hallowell, included the rhyme in collections, but in increasingly sanitized forms. What once may have been a stark reminder of poverty and hardship was reshaped into a comforting, if still strange, domestic image. The shifting versions reflect broader changes in society. During the 18th century, when child labor was widespread and poverty rampant, the rhyme's stern old woman mirrored a world in which survival demanded discipline. In contrast, the 19th century, shaped by ideals of family tenderness, presented her as a gentle mother, exhausted but loving. Folklorists have long noted how nursery rhymes often carried echoes of social commentary, political satire, or moral instruction. Could the shoe have symbolized confinement? Could the children have represented the masses? Was the rhyme a critique of overpopulation, poverty, or even government neglect? But beyond politics and morality lies something deeper. A shoe as a house is an oddity, too peculiar to be coincidence. Shoes have been symbols across cultures for journeys, protection, fertility, and even the grave. The persistence of this image across centuries hints at mythic origins, long predating its playful rhyme form. To uncover these layers, one must look not merely at printed collections, but at the shared memory of humanity itself. On closer inspection, the tale of the old woman who lived in a shoe resonates with themes found in ancient mythologies and symbolic traditions across the world. First, the shoe itself. In ancient cultures, shoes and sandals were more than simple garments. Among the Egyptians, shoes were associated with power and status, often buried with the dead to assist their passage into the afterlife. In Norse mythology, there is reference to a shoe made from the contributions of the dead, which would be given to Hel, goddess of the underworld. Shoes, then, were not merely coverings for the feet, but vessels of transition, markers of boundaries between worlds. Second, the old woman. Across cultures, the archetype of the crone embodies wisdom, fertility, and sometimes death. In Greek myth, Hecate, the dark goddess of crossroads, was depicted as an old woman guiding souls. In Slavic folklore, Baba Yaga dwelled in her strange hut upon chicken legs, nurturing and devouring, giving advice and issuing threats. The old woman in the shoe may not be a harmless caretaker but a distorted echo of this primal feminine archetype, the guardian of life and death. Third, the multitude of children. In fertility myths from Mesopotamia to Celtic traditions, abundance of offspring was seen as both blessing and burden. To have so many children she did not know what to do echoes ancient anxieties about survival, hunger, and the cycles of harvest. Children were both the promise of continuity and the weight of responsibility in a world where food was scarce. Taken together, these symbols suggest the story is more than a whimsical rhyme. The shoe is a house of transition, perhaps a tomb, perhaps a womb. The old woman is a goddess of threshold, the crone who governs fertility and death. The children are souls, restless and countless, entrusted to her keeping. Could it be that the old woman in the shoe is not merely a poor mother, but the lingering shadow of an ancient mythological figure? Misunderstood, softened, and transformed over centuries into a rhyme for children. In 1914, during an excavation in Wiltshire, England, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary. Buried beneath layers of chalk and soil was a small model of a shoe carved from bone, large enough to serve as a container. Inside the hollowed sole were fragments of tiny figurines, each resembling a child curled in fetal position. At first dismissed as a child's toy, later analysis suggested ritual use, a symbolic vessel of life and rebirth. Other discoveries soon followed. In Ireland, a peat bog yielded a leather shoe nearly 2 feet long, dated to the Bronze Age, with traces of ochre and plant fibers woven into its seams. Nearby lay the bones of a woman, advanced in age, surrounded by remains of children. The arrangement puzzled scholars until folklorists recalled the rhyme of the old woman in the shoe, passed down orally for centuries before its printing. Was this tale preserving memory of funerary rites or sacrificial customs? Further east, in the Carpathian Basin, Hungarian researchers unearthed what they called the house shoe idol, a clay vessel shaped unmistakably like footwear, with miniature human figures etched upon its surface. The motif of the shoe sheltering children was no longer an isolated oddity. It appeared to be a recurring theme stretching across Europe's prehistoric landscape. Comparative study revealed striking similarities with myths from Asia. In certain Indian traditions, shoes were offered in temples as symbols of humility and fertility. In Siberian shamanism, shoes served as spiritual vessels for journeying to other realms. The shoe, then, was not a random image but a sacred container, a passage from one state of existence to another. The nursery rhyme, it seems, may be the faint echo of rites remembered dimly, preserved in playful verse. Behind the innocent lines lies a story of ritual mothers, fertility sacrifices, and the mysterious symbolism of shoes as houses of life and death. What at first appears to be nonsense reveals profound symbolic weight when decoded. Each element of the tale, seemingly whimsical, aligns with patterns of myth, ritual, and human psychology. The shoe is the most striking symbol. To live inside a shoe is to dwell within a vessel of movement, protection, and journey. Shoes carry individuals across thresholds, and in many traditions they are ritually removed when entering sacred space. A house shaped like a shoe could signify dwelling within a liminal realm, neither entirely of this world nor the next. The shoe thus becomes both womb and tomb, the place of beginnings and endings. The old woman embodies the archetype of the crone, custodian of transitions. She may be a remnant of ancient goddesses of fertility and death, who both birthed and buried humanity. Her countless children might represent souls entrusted to her care, awaiting rebirth or safe passage to the underworld. Her harshness, in some versions whipping, scolding, denying bread, could symbolize the trials faced by souls before transition. In softened retellings, her tenderness reflects the dual nature of the crone, both nurturing and terrifying. The children are not simply offspring. They may symbolize humanity itself, restless, vulnerable, dependent upon the mysterious forces of fertility and fate. Their multitude speaks to abundance, overpopulation, and the eternal cycle of birth and death. To feed them broth without bread may reflect ritual deprivation, echoing initiation ceremonies where neophytes were denied sustenance before rebirth into a new state. Taken together, the rhyme reads as a symbolic map of existence. The shoe is the vessel of life. The old woman is the guardian, goddess, or ancestor. The children are humanity, countless and vulnerable, struggling within the confines of fate. To sleep in the shoe at night is to rest within the eternal cycle, waiting for dawn, rebirth, or release. What once was sacred myth became softened verse. The sacred shoe turned into a curious house, the goddess crone into a weary mother, the souls of humanity into noisy children. Yet the underlying truth remains, encoded in the rhyme, whispering of mysteries older than memory. The story of the old woman who lived in a shoe, once dismissed as a whimsical nursery rhyme, now reveals itself as something far greater. It is a convergence point, where folklore, archaeology, mythology, and spirituality intertwine. What seemed like a harmless rhyme hides the residue of ancient ritual. The shoe was not chosen by chance, but drawn from a deep reservoir of human symbolism, vessel of journeys, container of souls, marker of transitions between life and death. The old woman, often reduced to a caricature of poverty, emerges as a powerful figure, perhaps the shadow of a goddess, guardian of thresholds, caretaker of souls. The children, countless and restless, reflect humanity itself, forever dependent upon the cycles of fertility, survival, and rebirth. Through the centuries, the tale was reshaped, softened, and made suitable for the nursery. Harshness turned to tenderness. Ritual echoes dulled into playful rhyme. Yet the persistence of the imagery, an old woman, countless children, and a house in the form of a shoe testifies to the power of myth, refusing to vanish even when stripped of context. So the next time you hear the rhyme, do not think only of whimsy. Think of bones and peat bogs, carved shoe idols, ancient crones at the crossroads of myth. Think of humanity's attempts to encode survival, death, and rebirth into the simplest of symbols. The Old Woman Who Lived in a Shoe is not just a story for children. It is a mirror of ancient memory, a journey between worlds, a reminder that even the simplest verse may conceal the deepest truths.